The music began to play, and the lights in the venue dimmed. Suddenly, a spotlight illuminated the table where Eleanor and Noah were sitting. They looked up in surprise. Victoria, gracefully wearing a pure white dress, approached from the central stage with a microphone in hand. There was a full smile on her face, but Eleanor sensed something hidden behind it. "Everyone, thank you so much for coming to my special day," Victoria said sweetly. "But there's one more special thing today. Please, look, which city are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And hey, make sure you watch till the end. Something's going to happen that you won't see coming." This is my sister Eleanor and her son Noah. All eyes in the venue turned to Eleanor and Noah. Noah shrank in embarrassment and tightly held Eleanor's hand. "As you can see, my sister is a single mother, and her son, my cute nephew, live in a world a little different from ours." Victoria's words were met with giggles from the crowd. Eleanor sat frozen, her expression stiff. She could already predict what was about to happen. "So, today, I'd like to hold a special charity auction," Victoria declared loudly. "This single mother and her poor son, as a set, would anyone like to buy them?" The venue erupted in laughter. People dressed in luxury brands were laughing as though they were watching a circus sideshow. Tears began to well up in Noah's eyes. "Mom," he whispered, his voice trembling. He looked up at Eleanor. Eleanor tried to stand, but froze at what happened next. Martha stood up, taking the microphone from Victoria. "Let me add something," she said, laughing. "This auction can start at $0. I don't think they have any value." Again, the room was filled with laughter. Eleanor's chest felt as though it was about to burst with anger and humiliation. Noah was now crying audibly, his small shoulders trembling. Eleanor came to her senses. "Let's go, Noah," she said quietly, standing and taking his hand. But just as they were about to leave, a quiet yet powerful voice echoed from the back of the venue. $1 million. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the source of the voice, a gentleman with a calm demeanor, his gray-tinged black hair neatly styled, and a well-maintained suit. His blue eyes were filled with composure and dignity. "I'll buy this lady and her son for $1 million, he said again, his voice unwavering. Victoria forced a smile. "Well, someone with a sense of humor," she said, trying to brush it off. "This is not a joke," the man said quietly, as he walked toward the center of the venue. "I am James Morrison, William Griffin's attorney," Eleanor gasped. Her father's attorney. She hardly knew any of her father's business associates, but she had heard this man's name before. James walked to the center of the venue, looking toward Eleanor and Noah with a small smile on his lips. Then, his gaze shifted coldly toward Victoria and Martha. "Shall we continue with this auction," he said, "or shall we move on to the time to speak the truth?" At James Morrison's words, the grand ballroom was enveloped in complete silence, with only the light from the chandeliers illuminating his composed face. The groom, Richard, looked at his fiancée, Victoria, with a puzzled expression while his parents exchanged worried glances. "Before I speak," James turned back to Eleanor, "I must first apologize, Miss Eleanor Noah," he began. "I deeply apologize for having to convey the truth in this manner today. However, this was the wish of the late William Griffin." Eleanor held her son close, staring at James with an expression mixed with agitation and confusion. Noah had stopped crying, but his small body was still trembling. "Stop this nonsense," Martha shouted, her face contorted with anger. "Who are you?" "My husband couldn't have had an attorney. All his legal matters were handled by Carter and Smith." James took an envelope from his suit's inner pocket with a gentle smile. "That's correct, Martha. However, about 10 years ago, William began consulting me for personal matters, especially regarding his true will." "That's a lie," Victoria shouted. "Father's will has already been executed. Everything was handled legally." James slowly opened the envelope and pulled out a notarized document. "Yes, the apparent will was indeed executed, but this is the real, legally valid final will. William, for special reasons, had prepared two wills." He held up the document and motioned toward the screen. The contents of the document were displayed for all to see. The tension in the room deepened as James Morrison continued to speak, his voice firm but calm. "This will was signed and notarized 5 years ago, with specific instructions to be enacted only if certain conditions were met. The conditions are now met." Martha stood frozen in disbelief. "You can't be serious. What are you even saying?" "This will means nothing," James turned his attention toward the judge sitting in the corner, a stern-faced man who nodded slightly in confirmation. The judge's presence only added weight to James's words. "I assure you," James said, "this will is legally binding. It has already been submitted to the court, and the judge present here today has validated its authenticity. If you doubt its legitimacy, you can consult with your own attorney, but I believe you will find the same result." The room remained silent as the weight of James's statement began to settle. Victoria's face drained of color as she processed the information. Eleanor could feel her heart pounding in her chest. Her hands trembled slightly as she held on to Noah. She had no idea what was happening, but somehow, everything she had believed about her family was starting to crumble. Then, James reached into the envelope once more and withdrew a letter. He held it up for everyone to see before beginning to read aloud. "Dear Eleanor and Noah," he began in a quiet voice. "If you are reading this letter, it means that James Morrison has acted according to my instructions, and I suspect you are feeling confused and perhaps a bit lost right now." Eleanor felt her throat tighten as she listened, the words of her father echoing through her mind. She had not heard from her father in years, not since his sudden illness had taken him out of her life so unexpectedly. The letter continued. "First, I want to apologize for not revealing the truth to you sooner. There was a reason for this. I needed to be sure of your strength, your ability to take on the challenges that lie ahead, and I wanted to expose the true nature of Martha and Victoria. They have manipulated me for years, and when my health deteriorated, they made plans to push you out of the company and cut you off from your inheritance. But you, Eleanor, are my true successor." As James read, Eleanor felt the weight of her father's words sink in deeper. A mixture of emotions surged through her: anger, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. "Your honesty, your strength, and above all, your kindness, are the qualities I value most. These are the same qualities that make you the rightful heir to Griffin Real Estate." The letter continued. "I know you have the strength to raise Noah into a fine young man, and it is because of that I have always believed in you. The company is yours, Eleanor, and in time, it will be Noah's as well." Tears began to well in Eleanor's eyes. She hadn't realized how much her father had believed in her, how much he had trusted her to take control of everything he had worked for. "Please trust James. He is my most trusted friend, and he will protect you." The letter concluded. The room was completely silent as James finished reading. Eleanor could hardly breathe, the reality of the situation washing over her like a flood. She glanced at Noah, who was looking up at her with wide eyes, confusion etched across his young face. "Mom," he whispered, "did Grandpa remember me?" Eleanor held him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, sweetie," she whispered back, "of course, Grandpa always remembered you. He loved you very much." As she spoke, she glanced over at Martha and Victoria, who were standing frozen, their faces drained of color. The damage had been done, and they both knew it. Richard's father, sitting at a nearby table, stood up angrily. "What is going on here?" he demanded. "I was about to have my son marry into a family of fraudsters?" Richard, his eyes filled with disbelief, stared at Victoria. Sadness and anger flickered in his eyes. His voice was quiet, but full of hurt. "How could you do this?" Martha and Victoria remained silent, both too stunned to respond. Eleanor could feel the tension in the air, the walls of her old life crumbling around her, but she also felt a quiet sense of resolve building within her. James took a step closer to Eleanor and Noah, his voice soft but firm. "Miss Eleanor and Noah, let's leave this place. All the legal procedures are already in motion. There is much more for you to learn, but we can discuss it somewhere private." Eleanor stood slowly, taking Noah's hand. She looked around the room, one last time, at the people who had once been her family and friends, but they no longer held any meaning for her. Her heart was filled with something else now: gratitude for the father who had protected her and for the new life that awaited her. As they walked out of the venue, Eleanor could hear the murmurs of the crowd behind them, but she didn't turn around. Noah had fallen asleep in her arms by the time they reached the black sedan waiting outside. James gave her a small, reassuring smile as he opened the door for them. The black sedan glided through the streets of Boston, the city lights casting a soft glow on the windows as the night deepened. Eleanor sat in the passenger seat, her eyes fixed on the cityscape outside. The weight of the day, the shock of everything she had learned, settled heavily on her shoulders. She gently draped a coat over Noah, who had fallen into a peaceful sleep in the back seat. As she watched him, her heart swelled with a mix of love and sorrow. She had never imagined her life would take such a turn. She had always believed in the stability of her family, the love of her mother and sister, but now it all felt like a lie. "Are you all right?" James asked quietly, his voice pulling her from her thoughts. Eleanor sighed, her gaze still fixed outside. "I don't know. I'm in shock, I guess." James nodded, understanding. "You have every right to be. This is a lot to take in, but you're not alone. I'm here to help you every step of the way." She turned her eyes to him, appreciating the sincerity in his words. He wasn't just a lawyer or a business partner now. He had become someone she could rely on, someone who had shown her the truth when she had needed it most. "Why didn't Dad tell me?" Eleanor asked, her voice soft. "Why wait 3 years?" James looked ahead, his hands steady on the wheel as he drove. "Your father wanted to protect you, Eleanor. He knew what Martha and Victoria were planning, but he didn't want to confront them head on. He thought it best to let them expose themselves, to show you who they really were. And when he saw how you were raising Noah, he knew you were ready. He trusted you more than anyone else." Eleanor felt a lump form in her throat. She wiped her eyes quickly, trying to keep her composure. "I never knew he believed in me like that. I always thought I was just a daughter to him. But to hear that he trusted me with everything, with the company." James smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "He was always proud of you, Eleanor. He knew you were capable of taking on anything. He used to say, 'No matter what happens, Eleanor will stand strong. She'll rise above it.'" He had no doubts. Her heart ached as she thought of her father, the man she had always admired. The man who had raised her with such love, had seen her in a way she had never seen herself. The car continued its journey through the city, the road ahead uncertain but filled with possibility. Eleanor didn't know what the future would hold, but she knew one thing for sure. She would not let her father's legacy slip away. The next morning, Eleanor walked into James's office, her head spinning with the weight of the decisions she had to make. The office was quiet, save for the steady ticking of the clock on the wall. Noah was in the next room, where James's secretary was reading him a book, giving Eleanor a moment to focus. "Everything is prepared," James said, pulling out a stack of documents. "Court orders, asset freezes, everything is in place. We've already authenticated your father's will. The judge from last night has signed off on it. Martha and Victoria's assets have been frozen, and all the illegal transactions they made have been nullified." Eleanor took a deep breath. It was all happening so fast. "And what happens now?" James pushed a pile of papers toward her. "First, the management rights of Griffin Real Estate will be transferred to you. All company accounts will be under your authority. We will also file a claim to retrieve all the company funds that were misused by Martha and Victoria." She looked at the papers, the weight of her new responsibilities settling in. "I don't know if I can do this, James. Can I really manage a company this large?" "I've never run anything like this before." James smiled reassuringly. "You've got this, Eleanor. You studied business administration, didn't you? Your grades were exceptional. And even though you haven't had the hands-on experience yet, there are plenty of staff members here who can help guide you. And I'll be here to support you through it all." Your father left plans in place for exactly this. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the documents. "I never imagined this would be my life." James looked at her, his expression warm. "Your father believed in you more than anyone. And I do too." As the days passed, Eleanor's life began to shift dramatically. The legal battles unfolded, and the evidence James had prepared was overwhelming. One by one, Martha and Victoria lost everything. They were ordered to return the company funds they had misused, and their assets were seized. The engagement with Richard was called off, and Victoria disappeared from high society, her reputation shattered. Martha wasn't far behind. Meanwhile, Eleanor found herself becoming the CEO of Griffin Real Estate, a position she never expected. At first, the transition was overwhelming, but soon, her management skills began to shine through. She proved that she was more than capable of handling the role, and the company began to see the strength her father had always known she had. "You are your father's daughter," one of the veteran executives said to her one day, offering a rare compliment. "You've inherited his insight and kindness." Eleanor smiled quietly, her heart swelling with pride. She was living the legacy. her father had left behind, and she was determined to lead Griffin Real Estate into a new era. A few months after taking over her father's company, Eleanor invited James to her home for dinner. It wasn't just a work-related meeting this time. They had begun talking more about life outside of business, and their connection had grown stronger. As they sat in the dining room, Eleanor poured them both a glass of wine. Noah was already tucked in bed, sound asleep after a day full of school and activities. The air was calm, the low hum of conversation filling the room. "There's still something you're not telling me, isn't there?" Eleanor asked, looking at James across the table. Her voice held a hint of curiosity, but also trust. James hesitated for a moment before speaking, choosing his words carefully. "Your father didn't just want me to protect you and Noah. He also had a plan for how to deal with everything that happened in the past. He knew Martha and Victoria would eventually reveal their true nature, and he wanted to make sure you were ready for it." Eleanor listened intently, leaning forward slightly. "So, all this time, he was planning it?" James nodded slowly. Yes, he had suspected Martha and Victoria for years. Their actions weren't a surprise to him. But he didn't want to confront them directly until he had prepared everything. He wanted you to stand on your own, to find your own strength before all of this came to light. Eleanor felt a wave of emotion wash over her. The last few months had been a whirlwind, and she had yet to fully process everything. The truth of her father's actions, his unwavering belief in her, was slowly sinking in. "He always knew I had the strength," Eleanor whispered, almost to herself. "Yes, he did," James replied. "He was always proud of you, Eleanor, even when you didn't realize it." A comfortable silence hung in the air for a moment as they both took in the weight of the conversation. It was clear now that William had always been working behind the scenes, ensuring his daughter would have the chance to flourish, even if he couldn't be there to see it. A few weeks later, Eleanor unveiled her new vision for Griffin Real Estate. The company, which had been a staple of the Boston business world for decades, was about to take a new direction under her leadership. The board meeting was filled with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity, but Eleanor stood firm, confident in her plan. "I want to make Griffin Real Estate a company that not only succeeds financially but also contributes to society," she announced, her voice steady. "I've been working on an environmentally friendly housing development project, and I also want to create a housing initiative to support single parents. We'll not only provide homes but offer a chance for people to rebuild their lives." The room was quiet for a moment, and then one of the senior board members spoke up. "That's an ambitious plan, but if anyone can pull it off, it's you, Eleanor." Her proposal was unanimously approved, and with it, Eleanor set her sights on her next goal, creating the William Griffin Foundation. This new foundation would focus on helping single parents and families in need of support. Noah, her beloved son, would become the face of the foundation, representing the hope and future she wanted to build for others. "Mom, I want to help people in trouble too, just like Grandpa," Noah said one day, his eyes wide with innocence and hope. Eleanor smiled at her son, feeling a lump form in her throat. "You certainly can, sweetheart." The relationship between James and Eleanor also evolved over time. He was no longer just her legal advisor. He had become someone she could confide in, someone who had supported her through the most difficult chapters of her life. He began spending more time with Noah, taking him to baseball games and visiting the science museum on weekends. For the first time in a long while, Eleanor felt like she was not alone in the world. As Christmas approached, Eleanor stood in front of her father's old desk in the company's headquarters. The weight of her responsibilities still pressed heavily on her, but she was no longer afraid. She was ready for whatever came next. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered, her fingers brushing the edge of his framed photo on the desk. "I'll do my best." Outside the window, the city of Boston was bathed in soft winter sunlight, the snow beginning to fall gently on the streets. Meanwhile, in a small, modest apartment in the suburbs of Boston, Martha and Victoria sat in silence. The life they had once known filled with luxury and wealth had disappeared in an instant. They were now left with only their regrets and the harsh reality of their choices. Martha stood by the window, gazing out at the rain-soaked streets, her face drawn and tired. The once pristine designer clothes she had worn with pride now seemed a distant memory, replaced by the plain, utilitarian garments she now wore. Victoria, sitting at the small desk in the corner of the room, typed away at her computer, a far cry from the high society events she had once attended. She had lost everything: her wealth, her connections, and her status. Even her relationship with Richard had ended, her ties to his family completely severed. "Mother, would you like something to drink?" Victoria asked, her voice softer than it had ever been. Martha sighed, her shoulders sagging with the weight of their situation. Yes, some tea would be nice. It had been a year since their lives had changed so drastically. From the luxurious mansion they had once called home to the small apartment they now occupied, everything had been upended. The wealth, the cars, the endless parties gone. Now, they were left to fend for themselves, living quietly in the suburbs, trying to make ends meet.